Hey again, everyone. Great to be here on a Saturday night here at the Voice of College Football. Welcome in post Heisman Trophy ceremony. I appreciate everybody's patience. I lost track of time, but also we had issues connecting the call-in system, but I believe we are squared away now. So I appreciate everybody being here. For those of you who watched the anticlimactic unveiling of the Heisman Trophy winner, much like the college football playoff selections, it was obvious and deserving. I believe Bryce Young earned the Heisman Trophy as much as you possibly can, an award that is subjective and depends on your criteria, your selection process, your perspective on the sport and the positions, and who performed the best and who's the best player against the best teams and the best competition. And Bryce Young, Alabama quarterback, becoming the fourth Bama player in history and the fourth since 2009, meaning the fourth under Nick Saban. That's four Bama Heismans. Notre Dame, Ohio State, and USC stand at 7. Bama is charging hard with 4. And 4 in the past, what would that make it? 13 seasons, 2009 through 21, with Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry, Devontae Smith, and now 2 consecutive with Smith and with Young. We are taking your calls here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate you being here. The number is 860-499-3332. And, of course, we'll discuss anything in college football. We always open it up to anything you'd like to discuss. The one exception was during those playoff rankings watch parties. But other than that, we talk college football. And we talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. College football playoffs. The bowl games start in 6 days, with 2 next Friday, 7 next Saturday, many of which you would not recognize the names. I think out of the 40 some odd bowl games, we're usually in the low 40s or have been the last couple of years. About 15 of those switch out every year. These bowl games last about 2 or 3 years, and then another one pops up, or they change names or change sponsors, which change the complete name of the bowl game. But regardless, we've got, I believe, 42 or 43 bowl games. One was added to accommodate a couple 6-win teams. We are now adding bowl games to accommodate the teams that earned a bowl spot with a 500 record. Just more football. Just more football. Oregon has named a head coach. He is Dan Lanning of Georgia. So how will that affect the Bulldogs' preparation for Michigan? And did Oregon get the right guy? So Chip Kelly will not leave UCLA to go to Oregon. Chip Kelly stays with the Bruins, and Oregon replaces Mario Cristobal with Dan Lanning. The big news today, the Heisman Trophy winner, Bryce Young, the fourth for the Crimson Tide in its illustrious history, and Dan Lanning replaces Mario Cristobal at Oregon at the age of 35. Before we take your calls, keep in mind that if you would like to own a business, or maybe you already do own a small business and you would like financing, and you would like to do this the most effective way and the most efficient and the most cost-saving way, check out our guy Josh Van Horn over at Get Business Credit right here on YouTube. So you're on the right platform right now. You don't have to go anywhere, really. Just search Get Business Credit, and you'll find our guy Josh's channel, and he will instruct you on how to access business lines of credit at Get Business Credit. So it's easy to do. He is the guy that will get you all set on the path of accessing business lines of credit. So if you own a small business and don't know what to do in regards to gain and acquire financing, or you would like to own a business and that's your barrier right now, you've got a great idea, you've got all sorts of plans, but you need financing, that's the way to go. Get Business Credit, our guy Josh Van Horn. All right. We also had an Army and Navy game today, and I had it on the entire time. I was working, but I locked in on the fourth quarter, and Navy pulled off the upset against Army in a usual slugfest, as it always is, and tight to the belt. Not a lot of passing, of course, and a lot of running, a lot of defense, and a score under 20 points for each side. And Army loses to fall to 8-4. They still have a bowl game appearance against Missouri. Navy finishes its season at 4-8, but they won the big game. All right, our number here is 860-499-3332. I will post that on the screen in just a second. We're taking our first call to lead off tonight's show. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line? I'm good. What's going on?
I would just like to congratulate Heisman. Everybody knew this was going to come, but it's nice to have it officially solidified. Congrats to the finalists who did make it. I feel sorry for Will Anderson Jr. and Kenneth Walker for not making it, though. I felt like they deserved to be there in some form or fashion for their incredible season. So,
yeah, I would agree with that.
Congrats Navy for beating Army in their big game. I know they've gone 4-8, but they beat Army, so and every Navy fan out there probably thinks it's a successful season for them because they beat their big rival. And there was more passes thrown in that game than my memory serves me. I don't know if it was just because I was aware of it more, but it felt like they were actually dropping back and throwing passes. It was nice to see, not just run, triple option. It was nice to see a little bit of ride. It was still 90-10, but better than 99-1.
Yeah, I couldn't really tell you one way or the other there. I did not track the passing necessarily, but can't recall it being either more or less than what we've seen in recent years. Let's see. Navy threw it 6 times and Army threw it 16 times. Of course, they were behind in the fourth quarter, but they threw it 16 times. So I got to be right there with you on that. I can't imagine Army's thrown more than 16 passes in forever, if at all, in an Army-Navy game.
Right. And when they were behind, but it wasn't like they were behind 2 or 3 scores. So they could still run their stuff that they were trying to do.
Yep.
And then I heard you talk about the Dan Lanning hire for Oregon. And what do you think? There's this perception for Kirby Smart that he's a great defensive mind. Do you think it's because? Do you think this move? How do you think it'll impact the game that they have against Michigan? Do you think the defense will wane a little bit? Do you think the scheme will change up? Or do you think they're just basically just going to stick to what they know?
Oh, they're going to stick to what they know. They're not going to tear up their defense before they play Michigan. They're going to do what they do. So that's not going to be impacted in regards to evaluation of their personnel and how they're going to approach the Michigan offense and what they do week to week. Where it could impact them is just the dedication of time to Georgia versus Oregon. And that's what we encounter all the time. It comes up every offseason with multiple situations, with multiple coaches all over the place that have left to go to another job. And typically when it's the head coach, they'll leave. They will not coach their team through the bowl game. Typically, I think Billy Napier is at Louisiana. But certainly with the situation that typically causes a coach to leave, of course, if he's fired and typically will not stick around. But even if he chooses to leave, it's not under the best of conditions, so he won't coach the bowl game. But with the coordinators, it's typically a positive situation where They move on to their next job with the blessing of the university and the coaching staff and the head coach there, because they're bettering themselves, and typically stick around depending on the weight of the bowl game. And in this case, it's the most important game of the year. So I haven't looked into it to hear from Dan Lanning or what has been stated about his responsibilities. But what typically happens is he will start to recruit at Oregon, but he will say, "I'm working double time. I'm working all the time. I'm going to devote and do everything I possibly can to game plan for Michigan and prepare the defense. But at the same time, I'm going to spend this amount of time each day and recruit, because the Oregon recruiting situation is in dire need."
Yeah. Well, that's most of the Pac-12, to be honest.
Well, yeah, you could say that, but I'm talking about in their situation losing a coach. They just lost the best recruiter in the conference, and they've had the best class going on 3 years now, and they've got departures all over the place. So I'm talking about the immediate situation, not just this is Oregon State and they can't recruit. Yeah.
I get that. Do you think there's going to be some, because Oregon plays Georgia next year. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's first game? Do you think there's going to be some, like, we're not Kirby Smart into the DC's not going to tell them everything they plan on doing because of that game next year? Or do you think this is such a big game, forget that idea completely?
Do you think Dan Lanning's rephrase that question? Like, I get the concept of it, but what would they hold back from doing in this game? They got to win this game. They're not going to not do anything in this game. This is a college football playoff game.
I'm hearing some crazy stuff. You know how it is. Saying is short for fanatic. So I hear some crazy stuff on the message boards and stuff. So I just thought I would run it by you.
Well, Dan Lanning,
I don't agree with this.
I don't know the man personally. Is it possible that he could think, okay, I'm going to... Yeah, he's going to know. He's going to know when he leaves Georgia what he's leaving behind. And when they play the next year, he's going to have certain advantages, but that can't be helped.
Okay. And the final thing I would like to ask you about is, what are your thoughts about Manny Diaz being hired as the defensive coordinator at Penn State?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. I don't necessarily look at Manny Diaz and think that he's been that successful recently. He wasn't that successful as a DC at Texas. His Miami defenses, they're good. I thought Penn State, I didn't necessarily have a candidates list. I didn't give it a whole lot of thought. But, yeah, he's capable. He obviously impressed enough to earn the head coaching position at Miami from being a DC. He's a good one, but I think his defense has kind of lacked recently at Miami.
I would agree with that. I'm as a outside observer of Miami, I kind of felt like Manny Diaz. It must have been hard for him to stay professional with them searching for Mario Cristobal while he was still on the job.
Yes, that was not handled well. I don't care what anyone says, and I know we do 2 Miami shows, and of course they're going to defend the Miami tact. And basically the response was during our 2 Miami live streams that we have every Tuesday and Wednesday with the Wholesome One and with Cam Underwood, is that basically that's the way business is done. That's the way you do things. That's the way it is. And Manny Diaz should have been let go before. Well, regardless of that to me is a separate argument. And I think we came to an agreement on that those are 2 different decisions. Whether Manny Diaz should have been let go earlier, he was not. So he was retained. He should have been, to have a guy hanging out in the wind, flailing in the wind while you're deciding whether, well, you're not deciding, you're pursuing the guy that you want, but you're waiting on him to respond because he's also negotiating with Oregon and trying to see, okay, what are they going to ante up with? So Cristobal's waiting on Oregon. They obviously counteroffered. They wanted to keep him. Cristobal was in the process of making his decision. And if Miami, as we best understand it, if Miami was turned down by Cristobal, they were going to keep Manny Diaz for another year. That's a horrible position to put anybody. Yeah, they botched that. They may not have necessarily botched it. That might have been their plan, but their plan was unethical.
It was a stupid plan. It was a bad plan.
Well, it's ethically a bad plan. Yeah.
Right. Well, if you're Manny Diaz in that situation, part of me would want to leave and just say, screw you guys.
Oh, sure.
You guys want me fired, you want me gone. Leave. I'm leaving. I'm not going to work with people that don't want me.
Absolutely. And a coach with a more prominent background and track record that knows that they can pretty much go anywhere would have done the same thing. They would have said, see ya. I'm either your guy or I'm not your guy. I'm not your second guy. I'm your guy. Bye. Absolutely.
And it's not like Manny Diaz has been putting 2-7, 2-8 seasons together. I mean, last year they went 9-1 and made the ACC championship game.
Whoa. Well, they went 8-4 and they did not go to the ACC championship game.
Oh, sorry. I'm getting another team confused. Sorry.
But they had a decent season. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. You get the point. It's not horrible. They're not falling. They've not fallen completely off the face of the earth. They're about what there have been for the last 20 years, which is average football team.
If Miami was operating above board, they would have fired Manny Diaz because they obviously did not want him to be their head coach, and then would have gone full throttle after Mario Cristobal. And then had he turned them down, they would have had to continue a search and found a head coach instead of thinking, we're going to keep Mario or we're going to keep Manny as a backup plan and then go after Mario and keep Manny flailing for days. And it was out there on social media. It was all over the place. So Manny Diaz had to be completely aware of what was going on. And part of me wishes Mario Cristobal would have turned them down just to see the season and the off season first, and then the season play out with Manny Diaz as head coach at Miami, knowing that he was shunned and that he was mistreated. That's all there is to it.
Right. I don't understand how, if you're the next guy, I know Mario's the guy and he's from there and stuff, but I don't understand how you have not in the back of your mind. They did it to this guy, Manny Diaz. They could do the very same thing to me.
Oh, sure they could. Sure they could. It's going to be a while before that happens. He's going to have like 3 subpar seasons, and they invested a ton of money into him. So but yeah, this is business. So if that's the way they conduct business, yes, they could do that to Mario Cristobal 5 years from now. Absolutely, they could.
Yeah. And first off, if you're listening to this video, like the video. Mark's only 150 subscribers away on his USC channel from 1,000. So please subscribe to the USC Voice of College Football. And finally, as a UK fan, I would like to give my thoughts and prayers to everybody that was affected by the tornadoes last night.
Yes. I found out about that late this morning, early this afternoon. I had not been watching the news or was on social media, and I was on a phone call and somebody told me about it. Yeah, that is horrible. The amount of devastation and the amount of, we're talking about somewhere in the range of 75 people dead.
Yeah, there was Mayfield, the area that was hit the hardest, it looks like a bomb went off in the town and just completely vaporized it. I mean, there's rubble. Rubble's the only thing left. It's a sad event. And I hope everybody in that area is doing okay. I hope their families are okay, and I hope they get the help that they need. And Western Kentucky, their university actually got hit by a tornado, or somewhat partially hit by either a tornado or a huge gust of wind, and collapsed one of their buildings. Everybody's okay, but I think that needs to be mentioned because it's hardly been in the news. So, sorry to bring the conversation on a sour note, Mark, but I thought it was necessary. Have a great rest of your show.
It was necessary. Thank you to Real MVP. We appreciate it. Have a good night. There's a comment here in the live chat about what teams are still without a head coach. That's a great question. Is there anybody out there without a head coach? We're pretty well covered, right? Head coaches? Am I missing somewhere? Am I not thinking? I'm probably missing something obvious. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Michael. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, Michael. I'm doing well. How are you?
Hey, not bad. Hey, I want to echo the same thing as the real just did a minute ago. Hey, I got a question. Yeah, I know the Heisman Trophy mostly offense, but why is it that defensive players don't know how? Is it just pretty much offensive award now? I'm an offensive-minded person, but I like to see defense win. I've only seen it like, once in my lifetime? Win the Heisman?
Yes.
Which is Charles Woodson. But I wonder why they always shun defensive players for.
Why do defensive players not win the Heisman Trophy?
Yeah, I mean, you've had some that had tremendous numbers, like Will Anderson this year, Aiden Hutchinson. You've had great defensive players in the past. They don't even get an invite. I wonder, and stuff like that. Do they think it's just an offensive-minded award now? Or has it always been like that for the Heisman?
Here's the basic reason, is because offensive players score points, and that's easy to quantify. So we know who won the ball game because they scored more points, and the points are scored 99% of the time, roughly, whatever the number is, 95% of the time by the offense. So offensive players produce the points, and they produce the statistics, and we're lazy generally in evaluating players. So it's easier to evaluate offensive players than defensive players. And there is some kind of prevailing thought, even though no one would admit to it, that offensive players are more important than defensive players, which of course doesn't make sense. And in particular, the quarterback position, which does make sense. It is the most important position on the field, and even more so in the last 5 to 10 years because of the amount of passing. But the best player doesn't win the Heisman. It's not a best player award. It's supposed to be, but it's given to the best quarterback.
And how surprised was you that Aiden Hutchinson finished higher up than Will Anderson?
If I caught that correctly, you believe Will Anderson's the best player in the country?
No. I'm surprised that Aiden Hutchinson finished higher in the voting than Will Anderson did.
Yeah. Why is that?
I don't know, because I think, Hutchinson was the force and stuff like that. But I think Anderson had the better individual numbers. But I will close on this, Mark. When did Bryce Young secure the Heisman, in your opinion?
In the SEC championship game. I think that he took a major step forward. So a few things I think happened here. And for some reason I don't think it's your issue. I think I'm having an earpiece issue here. Anyway, I think it was a combination of things. Ohio State lost to Michigan on the same day that Bryce Young led Alabama to a comeback win against Auburn, and Bryce Young threw the game-tying touchdown with just seconds left in the game and led this remarkable 97-yard drive to tie the game. And basically he saved, and of course, it's a team game. He did not save Alabama's season, but he was the leader on the drive that saved the season. Otherwise, they're not going to be in the playoff. And he threw a game-winning touchdown pass, or a game-tying touchdown pass to send it into overtime, and threw the touchdown pass to win the game on the 2-point conversion. So that was happening the same day that C.J. Stroud was losing to Michigan. And then on top of that, Stroud did not play, of course, the next week. And Young put on the type of performance that he did against the #1 defense in college football. So I think heading into the Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Auburn weekend, that it was extremely close. And maybe Stroud had a slight lead, but it all turned on that afternoon.
Yeah, in my opinion, when he pulled Cadden come back in the Auburn game, that's when, in my opinion, that's when he secured the Heisman.
Absolutely.
All right. So, yeah, I want to say congrats to the Navy, maybe on a great game today and stuff like that. But it's going to be interesting to see what they can do, what Army can do with Missouri and stuff. And you go start doing your bowl predictions next week.
Bowl predictions. Absolutely. We will do bowl predictions. I predict all the bowl games. Yes, I do.
That you do. All right, Mark. Thanks so much, man. Have a great night. And
thanks, Michael.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Appreciate that. You
Take
too.
care. Yep. Bye. Bye.
All right. Give me just a second. On all sorts of issues. My earpiece for some reason. All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line? Hello, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McD Sports Board. How are you doing?
Hey, McD, what's going on?
Pretty good. I know I haven't called in a few weeks. I've just been really busy with something. So
You're a busy man.
I finally got a chance to.
Well, I'm glad that you could fit me into your plans tonight.
I'm happy about that too. I want to hit on a few things that happened over the past few weeks. I first want to talk about how the Maryland Terps are in a bowl game. I remember you telling me, Mark, that if Maryland makes a bowl game, you'll lay off Mike Locksley. Are you willing to lay off Mike Locksley a little bit since he made a bowl game?
A little bit. But I also predicted Maryland to go to a bowl game. They finished dead on, which reminds me of something, and I think our last caller, Michael, asked me to do this, is to look at my preseason predictions and match those up against the final records. So I'll brag a little bit on Maryland at least, because I think I had the Terps at 6-6. So I did have them in a bowl game. I don't think they accomplished anything substantial this year.
They're going to be in the Pinstripe Bowl against Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I will be watching. Those are two pretty lackluster football teams.
I expect Maryland to win. Virginia Tech doesn't have their head coach, which is an excellent hire. Their head coach, they're going to be going with an interim coach, which is usually what the teams do. That getting a new head coach. I want to talk about the whole Miami situation real quick. I predicted Manny Diaz once he got let go to be the Penn State's defensive coordinator, so I'm happy to see that. But he was done absolutely dirty at Miami. It was sort of like Tom Herman the year before at Texas. To me, they had to let Manny Diaz go because he was a dead man walking. Going behind his back, negotiating with Mario Cristobal while he was still employed as the head coach at the University of Miami. So I felt like they had to let him go, sort of like how they had let Tom Herman go last year. The only difference is that Miami did get upgraded at head coach, in my opinion, and Mario Cristobal, even though I do think he's very overrated, because I do think he's a great recruiter, Mario Cristobal, but I think in-game coach, I honestly think he's not good at that. I just think so. I didn't think they got upgrade, but I just want to say that I think Manny Diaz was done dirty. I know one previous callers mentioned that, but I want to echo that.
I agree, and I explained all of that with the last caller, so I won't go into that again. But I made my thoughts known, so I completely agree with you.
And then one more question I have before you let me go. Which new head coach is going to win a championship first?
Ooh.
Brian Kelly at LSU or Lincoln Riley at Southern Cal?
Who is going to win a national championship first? I believe that Lincoln Riley will make the college football playoff first. But whether he will win a championship, I'm going to go with Lincoln Riley. And you know why? This is my decision. This is my decision on this. And again, he's got an easier path to the playoff, but I don't necessarily know if he can build up USC to be as good as what LSU is. And if we look at recent history, of course, the last three coaches at LSU were able to utilize all the resources and the money and everything available and the talent pool right there to win a national championship. Brian Kelly is how old? He's at least 60, right? I'm going to look up how old Brian Kelly is.
He's at least in his 50s. He's at least in his 50s. I don't know how old he is.
Brian Kelly is 60. Yes, he turned 60 a couple months ago. Okay, that's not old by any stretch, but still, he is in the latter stages of his career, probably. Most guys don't coach past their late 60s. If I was going to wager, I would say that Brian Kelly is not going to win a national championship at LSU, and Lincoln Riley is Lincoln Riley's what, 40? 42, whatever he is. Anyway, he's 15 plus years younger than Brian Kelly. I just think he's going to outlast Brian Kelly. That's what the odds say. So that's where my money would go and why it would go to Lincoln Riley.
I see what you're saying. I can't disagree with that.
Lincoln Riley's 38. My only question is if you...
Oh, he's 38?
Yep, I'll take Lincoln Riley.
My only question with USC is, can they get the same recruits as the SEC with Lincoln Riley there consistently to compete for a national championship? I think next season Southern Cal should be preseason top 10, and I think they'll finish in the top 10. But I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs next year if it's the same playoff system. I know they were talking about expanding it starting next year, but we'll see. I'm just that wow about this whole coaching carousel.
Well, think of it this way, McD. There are better and more recruits in California than in Louisiana. If you just tie it down to their specific state, California is a better talent pool than Louisiana. And Louisiana is a great talent pool, just the population's small. California's got more college football, top-level college football prospects than Louisiana. Now, obviously, LSU is going to be in Florida. They're going to be in Texas. They're going to be elsewhere. But they've got to fight Alabama, Texas A&M, and Ole Miss, and Florida, and everybody else for those players. Whereas USC should be able to, I don't think that any school in any part of the country in this day and age is able to put a fence around any area. But to a large degree, USC can put a wire fence around Southern California, let's say, with Lincoln Riley, and keep the top players. Plus, then they play in a horrible conference. And every so often somebody will say, as they did last night or the night before when I was on here and called the Pac-12 a horrible conference, that I was being too negative about the Pac-12. Well, the Pac-12 is horrible right now. It's horrible. So that's just the way it is. It's a horrible conference.
I agree with you, but I still think some of the recruits in Southern California, they're going to go east to the SEC schools because the Pac-12 is so bad. Like some of them probably want to compete in a tougher conference.
Oh yeah.
So
that's why
I
right
would
now. But
on that.
Lincoln Riley just left Oklahoma, and he took some of his best players with him. a lot of them are leaving. I'm not talking about his best current players. I'm talking about his best recruits. And that was a top 5 class in the country. About 4 or 5 of those guys decommitted from Oklahoma immediately, including Raleek Brown, who's the 2nd or 3rd rated running back in the country, committed to USC. And he's collecting players already for USC's class.
I know. I just, in my opinion, I honestly just don't think and you would think that every Los Angeles player would want to go play at Southern Cal. I just don't see that with the NIL money getting thrown around and also with the competition. I mean, as you stated a minute ago, it's going to be Southern Cal and everybody else. Utah's going to win the Rose Bowl and Kyle Whittingham's going to retire. It's the report going around if he wins the Rose Bowl. Oregon with Dan Lanning, we'll see. I have no faith in any other team though in the Pac-12 right now. So to like seriously compete, like some of those teams will have nice 8-9 win seasons, but I just don't see every recruit in Southern Cal or on the West Coast saying I want to go play at USC. So that's why I don't know if he can win championships. I think he'll make playoffs maybe by default if he goes 12-0 and they have a tough non-conference schedule, and especially with the expansion of the playoffs, with the automatic bids of conference champions. But I just don't. I don't know if he will recruit, have enough recruits or enough talent to win national championships. That's the one thing I'm worried about with Southern Cal, with Lincoln Riley. So, but that's all I have, Mark. Thanks for taking my call. Go Terps. We're going to beat Virginia Tech in the Pinstripe Bowl.
All right, McD. Have a good night. Appreciate it.
See you.
I'm going to call out my guy, Paul Van Wagner from ESPN Blacksburg. He hosts along with Mike McDaniel, hosts our Virginia Tech pregame and postgame here at the Voice of College Football. And on one particular show this year, I believe they had mentioned Josh Jackson, who, of course, left Virginia Tech at quarterback and went to Maryland. And Paul had some disparaging comments to make about the Maryland program, that it was trash, and a few other things, which in McD's place, I took some exception to. Why? I don't know. I was defending Maryland football, but I jumped in the live chat and I pointed out some statistics and backed up why Maryland at this point is pretty much the same program as Virginia Tech. It's really not any worse than Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech has taken a tumble. Virginia Tech's not a good football program right now. Virginia Tech is Maryland. Virginia Tech is Missouri. Virginia Tech is TCU. TCU's taking a tumble. Virginia Tech is I'm going to say Illinois. And I'm going to say even Illinois's got a really good coach that's proven, and they're probably on the upswing. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Yeah, how's it going, sir? This is Steve.
Hey, Steve.
How's it going on? Yeah, I apologize in advance if this has already been discussed, but it's kind of piqued my curiosity. With looking at Clemson, and they're losing both their coordinators within a week or so, and then they've had at least 10 enter the transfer portal, and pretty good players. With that being said, I don't know if you heard in your circles or if you have a take on what's going on over there. Is it just like an opportunity came up for both these coordinators, or it's kind of interesting why the people are jumping ship over there when there's still quite a bit of talent. It's kind of a curious.
Yeah, but they're not jumping ship. We're talking about a coordinator going to Oklahoma as the head coach. We're talking about a coordinator in Brent Venables who has turned down all sorts of really good jobs, including the most recent Auburn. last offseason, and now takes the job at Oklahoma, which looks like it's the only head coaching job that he was waiting for, or maybe not necessarily waiting for, but considering that he would jump for. So you're talking about a top 5 program in the country. So it's not like he's just leaving to go wherever. And the same thing with Tony Elliott to a lesser degree. He's going to an ACC job as a head coach. These are coordinators leaving to go to prominent head coaching positions.
Yes, sir. Yeah, but also you factor in also they have at least 10 players in the transfer portal. You know, a lot of them are still 4 and 5 star recruits that are leaving. Maybe they felt they weren't going to get the playing time because other players coming in behind them we're gonna kind of push them down the depth chart. But also going back to Coach Venables, I mean, I know he has two of his kids are still on the roster at Clemson. I think one's a junior, one's a sophomore. I know the older Jake, I think he's gonna actually he's done with football because of injuries. But I just find it kind of interesting that they would just with all these departures. And I know you explained about the coordinators and their opportunities, but I don't know. I just thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, when you say 10 players are in the transfer portal, you know, we just did a Michigan State record yesterday, and they've got 10 players in the transfer portal. And they of course have a head coach who everybody's raving about, and they just had a turnaround breakthrough season. And you know, I haven't counted the number of players in every team's transfer portal to see what the average is, but I really don't think that's uncommon. I heard a number the other day, which was 1,300, which with 130 FBS teams, that's about 10 per team.
Yeah, but it's still kind of interesting at Clemson that the culture at Clemson, it seems like they've kind of went above and beyond other programs where they don't bring in transfers. They try to cultivate their talent and build their talent. But I don't know. Obviously I haven't done the research, and I apologize. But I thought maybe there might be some kind of information out there that has not really been put out. And that's what I was kind of curious on your take.
Sure. Well, you don't need to apologize for anything. That certainly sounds like a lot of players. I get that are leaving and in the transfer portal. At the outset of this transfer portal, and it's been around for a few years, but obviously it has become the destination of all these players and really ramped up in numbers just in the last year or so. And the early results seem to make sense. You know, you could definitely look at the list and say, I understand that these players do not have the opportunity. And typically it was there were more quarterbacks in the transfer portal for obvious reasons. If you're an offensive lineman and you're looking for playing time and you can't find playing time on a particular team, everybody plays 5 offensive linemen. I know that they play different positions, but they play 5 offensive linemen and usually rotate in roughly 2 guys. So 7 offensive linemen play. So if you're not starting there, then I don't know where you're going to go on the same level and start. But at quarterback, obviously, there's only one guy. It makes that position unique from that perspective as well. And that's why we saw it was a quarterback-driven category. But now I see players that are leaving situations where I'm not understanding why they're leaving. They're playing, they have a prominent role on the team, and they're just leaving.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going back to the Clemson transfers, I know so far there's been 2 of them that have landing spots. I think Lynn J. Dixon is going to WVU. I forgot the name of the other player where he's going, but I know one of the other prominent name is that Tyson Fomakan. He's into the transfer portal, but it was interesting last spring or before last spring, Coach Sweeney was kind of like hyping him as a draftee, similar to the skills of of the Seattle quarterback, Seahawks quarterback, and then even Tikio, another offensive lineman who was hyped by Dabo Sweeney in the spring, and he's gone too. So I don't know. I just find it interesting that they were kind of being cultivated and kind of brought up in the system, and all of a sudden they just decided to bail. But I'm sure it's a lot of his playing time, because in the case of the quarterback, I know 5 stars coming into Clemson this fall, or this probably a mid-year, he'll probably push DJ, probably the second team quarterback more than likely. But yeah, I don't know. I just found it kind of interesting why especially Clemson, the high-profile program, that all this stuff was going on. But no, I appreciate your time, sir, and everything that you've taken to answer my questions. That's all I have.
Thanks for the call, Steve. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
I wish you the same. Thank you, sir.
All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, let's keep it rolling. Bryce Young is our new Heisman Trophy winner. All right. Who's on the line?
Hey, it's Michigan Man. What's up?
Michigan Man. What is up?
Man, I can't say too much. I just wanted to, I'm going to keep this brief because I know you got a lot of callers. I just wanted to touch on 2 quick things. Bryce Young, obviously, he won the Heisman. And I'm just speculating because I haven't followed Alabama football as closely as probably a lot have. I don't watch a lot of SEC football. Obviously, he won it by a landslide. What I wanted to ask you is, it seemed like his signature moment that was the game against Georgia. And I know you've talked about it a lot before. And matter of fact, after the Georgia game, I watched Paul Feinbaum talk the next day about Bryce Young. He pretty much said, Bryce Young has won the Heisman. That was his signature moment. He's won it. And I believe it was deserving. Like, I don't think that he didn't deserve to win it. But what I wanted to ask you is, when they played that game against Georgia, obviously we already know the story. Georgia, before that game, their best win was against the Clemson team that now is 9-3. Clemson's also lost to Georgia Tech. So I feel like Georgia
Clemson did not lose to Georgia Tech.
They didn't?
No.
I thought they lost to Georgia Tech this year.
No.
They lost the games. Who did Clemson? Well, I'll look it up later. I thought one of their losses was to Georgia Tech.
They lost to Pitt. They lost to Georgia. They lost to NC State.
Okay, it was NC State. That was the one I was thinking of. NC State, obviously, they're not really that good a team either. But so
whoa. So Michigan Man, I'm always gonna. This is something that I do here. I just don't let people. I let all of you guys just give your opinions, and obviously I sit and listen because I can talk all day and I can be here all day, and so that I shine the spotlight on you guys, and I want to give you the time. But anytime anyone says anything that is factually wrong, I'm going to jump on that just to correct and make sure that the right information is going out. And then secondly, if somebody says something that I find somewhat inaccurate, even though it's not factual, I'm going to jump on that as well. So you're telling me NC State's not a good team?
Well, it just depends on. Well, I mean, I don't want to offend an NC State fan, but it just kind of depends on what level you're talking about. I mean, they may be decent on the ACC standards, but I don't think they would give Ohio State a run for their money. Or
they're not. No,
like
they're
that.
not Ohio State, but they might be Michigan State or Purdue. They might be in that range.
Yeah.
So they're a pretty good team. There's not a whole lot of. See, this is the thing. When we start to rate wins, it's difficult to find wins at that level because obviously those teams don't lose games. So losing to NC State, and I am not trumpeting NC State as some dominant football team, but they are one of the 20 best football teams in America. But go ahead.
Okay.
Go to your point.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. The point I was wanting to make basically was I just felt like Georgia did go into that game with maybe, and this is my opinion, but a little bit of undeserved credit because they did play one of the easiest. I mean, they played a really easy schedule, and to me, it just didn't seem like Alabama. They were dominant from beginning to end for the most part. I mean, it seemed like they were playing a team that they were just better than, and I just didn't see. I mean, I saw Bryce Young do a lot of quarterback type things. He made a lot of really good plays, but I didn't see that as anything. It kind of seemed like maybe they were playing an overinflated team that really wasn't as good as maybe they were made out to be. And that kind of warranted a little bit of some of the signature things that he did. I think that Georgia's defense is not as good as maybe they've been propped up to be. And it really, and like I said, I'm not dogging it because I think he deserved the trophy. I'm not saying at all, but the fact that it was won by such a landslide, do you think it was deserved? I mean, and not just, and I'm not just lobbying for Aiden Hutchinson, but I thought C.J. Stroud did really, really good this year too. Like it wouldn't have shocked me if he would have won it. I mean, obviously we knew before this even happened that it was going to be Bryce Young. Everybody already knew it was going to be Bryce Young that won it. But his signature.
But before the
was against
season, we knew that.
I mean, not the season. I'm sorry. Before.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Before the
Okay.
ceremony. That's what I'm going to say. I apologize. But I mean, pretty much everybody knew before the ceremony. No, before the season, everybody thought it was going to be Spencer Rattler. But I don't know. Were you happy with the outcome of it? The way it was, the landslide that it was. Did you think that? I mean, did you think it was warranted that he said? You know, did you share the opinions of most of the Heisman Trophy voters?
So I did not see the vote. I didn't look at the vote, but you're telling me it's a landslide, and I expected it to be one. The way things turned out, a couple weeks left in the season, I would have had a difficult decision naming my own personal Heisman Trophy winner. Now, after Kenneth Walker had the game that he did against Michigan, and considering what he did prior to that, he was my front runner. He was my guy. And then, of course, his team started losing. He didn't perform well, or did not get an opportunity to perform well against Ohio State, so he dropped off my board. I would have voted for Bryce Young without even giving it 3 seconds of thought. I think he was clear in a way the best candidate to win the Heisman Trophy. And the Georgia defense, was the Georgia defense overrated? To your point, I would answer yes, because most people were calling it the best defense in 30 years. Well, they will have an opportunity to atone for that and possibly regain that type of status. But as it's turned out, at this point, they're not quite that good. Does Georgia have the best defense in the country? Probably. Do they have the most NFL players on defense in the country? Probably. So they still have an extremely good team. And I do think that this knock against Georgia's schedule is a bit overblown. I think it's extremely overblown. Kentucky's good. Clemson's good. Arkansas's good. Auburn's a pretty quality team. You know, Auburn can play with anybody in the, in the back portion of the top 25.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I guess it's just a speculatory thing to me. I think a lot of those teams are good too. It just, when you're talking about a number one team, and this is supposed to be the year that they just are supposed to just tear everybody apart, and when they go up against an Alabama team that has
they did tear everybody apart.
But when they played what another team that I would consider elite, it didn't work out for them at all, and that's what would make me kind of evaluate looking back some of the other teams. I'm not saying those teams are bad, but anyway, I'll let that roll. I just had one more question for you, man. Do you think that when Ohio State finishes their season, do you think that they'll do any moving around with their coordinators, particularly Kerry Coombs? Do you think he's safe to come back next year? Because I know they had some problems on defense.
Ohio State hired a defensive coordinator.
Oh, did they? I haven't even been keeping up with it. So Kerry Coombs is out.
Yes, Ohio State hired Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State to run the defense.
Wow. See, I'm a truck driver, so I'm not around the media a whole lot. I just watch your show all the time. I didn't even know that. I thought that Kerry Coombs was still there.
Wow. He might still be there, but he's not running the defense, nor was he running the defense the last half of the season this year.
Right. Yeah, I know they had demoted him through the season, so I was expecting him to potentially be out by the end of the season, but it looks like maybe they'll still keep him and just keep him demoted. Well, that's interesting. Well, I guess that answers all my questions, man. I appreciate you taking my call.
I appreciate the call. You have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, man. Bye.
It's going to be fascinating watching Georgia play Michigan. It's going to be fascinating. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, how's it going, Mark? This is Emmanuel.
Hey, Emmanuel. What's going on?
Not much. The one thing I wanted to kind of discuss with you was, and it's not necessarily entirely related to college football directly this year, but the firing of Brady over at Carolina, which shocked me mid-season when it looked like he was like primed for a head coaching job in the NFL, if not college football. I wanted to see what your thoughts were.
Well, why do we think he was primed for a head coaching job in the NFL after being the offensive coordinator at Carolina? And I love the NFL. I used to follow it extremely closely. I used to be able to recite, everybody's rosters and all that business and statistics, but I just watch the games on Sunday. So I don't look into it. I don't follow it. I just don't have time, nor do I care to. So I'm guessing Carolina had a marginal offense. They didn't find a quarterback. I know that. So why would he have been in line for a head coaching position in the NFL?
Well, it just seemed like he was primed, after leaving LSU with that offense. And he was just rumored for the LSU job. He was rumored for, any big coaching job. And it seemed like he was, known as an offensive guru, that the head coaching jobs for the NFL were potentially in his wheelhouse. And now by getting fired, I think the only thing that he has left going for him is going back to college football as an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I think his options are many.
If you're Chip Kelly, do you make that call?
If I'm Chip Kelly, do I want Joe Brady to run my offense?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know this for sure, but just observing Chip Kelly, I think that he wants to be the mastermind of his own offense.
Well, he had, what was it, Reeves up there in Notre Dame?
Yes.
That stayed behind?
Well, he had Jed Fish first, correct? And then he had, who did they bring in after Jed Fish got the Arizona job? I don't remember.
Then it was, yeah. So does Chip call the plays on offense?
I don't know that. I don't know that for sure.
Because I was thinking Chip would, obviously with his ties to LSU and the offense that he had, I think he'd be primed to go back and be the OC at LSU.
We don't know if, I think that only based on what I know that Joe Brady only called a portion of the plays at LSU in certain situations.
Interesting. What do you think of Diaz being the DC at Penn State?
I haven't been that impressed with his defenses recently at Miami. They're good. They're decent. And then he turned it over to Blake Baker, but still kind of had a lot of influence over the defense. I would have thought that Penn State would have come up with somebody different. I don't know off the top of my head. I wasn't really sizing up Penn State defensive coordinator candidates before he was hired. But, yeah, he's had success. That, of course, set him up for a head coaching position. But I've not been overly impressed with Miami's defensive performance. It's been good.
Gotcha. And lastly, so I'll let someone else call. How are, in the age of information, how are, the candidates for coaches just so off? Like today, Oregon, and your thoughts as well about this, Oregon hired Georgia's defensive coordinator as their head coach. That was on no one's radar. Again, with like the Lincoln Riley And again, going back to in the age of information and, Twitter and a 24-hour news cycle and 24-hour sports, how can they be so off?
Yeah. So you are making the comment that I've made 50 times in the last couple of weeks, because that's my response as well, that in the age of information where everybody has a computer in their pocket that is more powerful than what was used to put a man on the moon 50 years ago, that you would think that there would be too many people involved to get conversations going and make connections, that somebody would leak it out or somebody would find it out and we would get this. In the past, it seemed that the candidates that were listed for any head coaching position were typically the candidates that then produced the eventual head coach. And now it seems like all the prominent head coaching positions that come open, we, meaning fans, media, come up with a list of names based on a number of things. And the eventual head coach doesn't even come from that list ever. I don't have an answer to that question, except for you don't need to travel anywhere anymore. If you're Lincoln Riley and you want to talk to USC's athletic director and he wants to talk to you, nobody else needs to be involved. Nobody else needs to be involved anymore. You get on a Zoom call and that's all you need to do. And the USC athletic director could possibly work completely alone, completely could just reach out to Lincoln Riley and have all those conversations without any interaction with anyone else. And that's how it stays airtight and just between Lincoln Riley and I believe his first name, Mike Bone, the USC athletic director. There you go. Person to person. No one else is involved until they start to obviously have to involve lawyers and the administration and everything and working out contracts.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. Well, how do you grade that hire for Oregon? I know it's too early to tell, but what do you think of that pick?
I don't really have a strong opinion of it in terms of what he's been able to do on the field. That's obvious, despite some of the criticism of Georgia's performance defensively against Alabama. I think we overreact, of course, and Georgia has the best defense in the country. And he was not only responsible for the development of those players and the schemes involved, but the recruitment of many of those players, and really had a hand in the recruitment of all those players. So that's what it seems as though Oregon is replacing a Mario Cristobal, whose number one plus was recruiting, with another recruiter, where the X's and O's, and I'm not saying that this isn't a weakness of Dan Lanning's. I don't know. I'm just saying that from a recruiting standpoint, Oregon's replacing, Cristobal, Lanning, step for step. So that's a priority.
Yeah, no letter grade for you yet?
Oh, I don't have a letter grade because I don't, I can't say that I've been tracking Dan Lanning's career. I don't know that I've ever heard a word come out of his mouth. So at some point, if I've never, I could have heard him interviewed at some point and not just remembered it, but I've never heard him state a sentence that I remember. So I'm just going by the performance of the defense, which is, of course, through the roof. but he's not been a head coach.
Well,
so
exactly.
anybody who gives that hiring a grade is guessing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally. Absolutely. Well, Mark, I'm going to let another caller go get on the line. But, hey, thanks so much for your time.
Hey, thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Of course. Have a good night. Bye.
You too. All right. We are moving along here at the Voice of College Football. Who's next up?
Good evening, Mark. Kevin, Dallas, Georgia. How you doing?
Hey, Kevin. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Mark, but I'm going to have to step off the sideline. What did Don Corleone say in The Godfather? The more I try to get out, the more y'all pull me back in. The Michigan caller brought me back in, Mark. I have to go back to our conversation the other evening, and I have to put all decorum on the side for a moment. And I'm just got to be honest with you, Mark. William Anderson Jr. should have been invited. Mr. Hutchinson, although he had a nice story, almost made a tear come out of the corner of my right eye. But Mr. Anderson should have been invited. Going back to what you stated as far as, okay, well, Bryce Young had more of an impact as far as the University of Alabama than William Anderson Jr. did. And I would have to just go back in the Wayback Machine for a moment. When Auburn won the national championship, that particular year they had the two most dominating players in college football. The most dominating players for on the offensive side as well as the defensive side with Cam Newton and Nick Fairley. Fast forward. The most dominating players as far as down for down, play for play in college football this year. Bryce Young, as well as William Anderson Jr. And by that being the case, would he have won it this year? Probably not. But if you just look back at what the tally stated tonight, Mark, he had more of the five candidates. He had more first place votes than two of the other candidates. So some people are saying something that, hey, those people that, as you always so eloquently say, state that are looking at the world through crimson-colored glasses saw. I saw in the chat as far as someone stated as far as how many sacks that he had versus SEC East schools. His stats were consistent throughout the year. He didn't rack up all his stats against doggone Southern Miss, Mercer, and Directional State University. He had a consistent year. Not only did he rush the passer, not only did he play the run, but he also dropped back in coverage.
Okay.
So, Mark, at the very least, he should have been invited this evening, Mark.
I think we had this conversation the other day, and I stated that I don't know. I'm guessing, or I have heard what the stipulations are for being invited. They've got a range of the number of players that they invite. It's either between 4 and 5 or 3 and 5. It's a minimum of 3, maximum of 5, or something like that. But I don't know what those are for sure.
And that being the case, Mark, if someone had to not be there this evening, I have to go on and say, hey, Mr. Hutchinson.
So I'm looking at.
Hutchinson shouldn't have been there if you want to pick it.
Okay.
But William Anderson Jr. should have been there.
All right. We're going to get through this right this second. So here's Will Anderson. His number of sacks: 1 against Miami, 1 against Southern Miss, 1 against Ole Miss, 4 against Mississippi State, 2 against Tennessee, 1.5 against LSU, 2 against New Mexico State, 1 against Arkansas, 1 against Auburn, 1 against Georgia. When it comes to his tackles for loss, 1 against Miami, 2 against Florida, 3 against Southern Miss, 2.5 against Ole Miss, 4 against Mississippi State, 2 against Tennessee, 4 against LSU, 2 against New Mexico State, 3.5 against Arkansas, 3 against Auburn, 2 against Georgia. Okay. Our man, Aiden Hutchinson. So give me just a second here. This will cooperate. We have Aiden Hutchinson, his sacks. 1 against Western Michigan, 2.5 against Washington, 1 against Northern Illinois, 1 against Rutgers, a half a sack against Wisconsin, half a sack against Northwestern, 1 against Michigan State, 3 against Penn State, 1 against Maryland, 3 against Ohio State, 1 against Iowa for 15.5. I think that's the same number as Will Anderson, 15.5. Or I'm sorry, Anderson is 15.5. Hutchinson has 14. Okay. To your point, Kevin, Will Anderson has, depending on how they count this, I'm on the College Football Reference page, which is kind of my Bible statistically, and they had Will Anderson with like 29 tackles for loss, but I saw like 31 or 32 on some other listing. Aiden Hutchinson, according to this, has 15.5. So he has about half as many tackles for loss as Will Anderson. The only thing I go to on this is I still am going to say that I believe that Aiden Hutchinson was more important to his team. Now, that's not the criteria of the Heisman Trophy. The Heisman Trophy is supposed to go to the best player. And it seems like Aiden Hutchinson, though, just based on me watching as much football as I do, was critical to, like, I don't think Michigan's where they are without Aiden Hutchinson. Without Will Anderson, you could make the same argument, except it seems like Alabama's in this position every year. So regardless of who they have, like Michigan's never in this position.
That is true. That is true. One thing I also wanted to chime in about, Mark, was in reference to the coaching carousel. And when I look at it for at least 5 or 6 institutions, USC, LSU, Florida, Oklahoma, Texas, and Clemson. Of those institutions, the one that I'm most really concerned about, for lack of a better term, would be Clemson. Because I'm interested to see as far as what direction they're going to go as far as OC and DC. But then also, would it be correct to say that as far as a coach, in order to be successful, has to be, whether it's tweaking it, they have to be willing to change. And it seems like the only person that is stuck in time is Dabo Swinney. He has he don't want to embrace as far as the transfer portal. As far as if you make a commitment to Clemson, you can't go to any other schools as far as a visit. Would it be correct to say, if you had to look at, quote, the old man that's saying, getting off my lawn, and then as far as the younger guy that shouldn't be saying that, when I use that phraseology, is in reference to Saban and Swinney. It seems like the two, the only one that has changed and has embraced change has been Saban. Why it seems like Swinney is just caught in yesterday. And yesterday don't mean a hill of beans until yesterday is as successful as, or excuse me, today and tomorrow is as successful as what yesterday was.
I think you're being fair. Now, we'll see if he changes. We'll see if he is forced to change. We'll see if he wakes up and embraces that change, or at least tolerates it and goes forward with it, or if he's going to be successful to some degree regardless. But is he going to be able to maintain the success that he's had in the past? Well, he's going to have to make NIL and the transfer portal benefits or advantages to his program, not things that he's fighting against that are necessary evils, because it's tough enough just to win, and without making two components to the modern game and the way the acquisition of players is impacted to make those barriers. So he's going to have to change to a certain extent. You can maintain your, you can generally maintain your principles, but things change. Nick Saban has often said that he would love football to be played like it was 15 years ago, but it's not. So he either could have stayed with an I formation with a fullback and run a 1998 offense and started losing 3 and 4 and 5 games a year because he wanted to run that offense, or he could have said, you know what, I don't like this. I don't like where the game's headed, but I have to change if I want to win. And he did, and he did it successfully. So that's going to be up to Dabo Swinney. I think he's fully able to continue to be a successful head coach. We'll see. That's an interesting point, though, that you bring up, because when you ran down that list of programs that might be in trouble, for me, it's Texas. But I totally get your point with Dabo Swinney.
Well, pardon me, Mark, in reference to Texas, from what I understand is that it's a possibility of at least 30 guys having to change uniform at probably after Christmas break. That there'll be at least 30, whether it's via transfer portal or those guys that's going to be signed on Wednesday. So it's a matter of changing because of things that have happened as far as, okay, the Bo Davis fiasco, and then, hey, just guys not fitting into Sarkisian's system and way of doing things. And then following the Michigan State model, if Michigan State can be successful with a turnover as far as personnel, then, hey, can't you do the same as far as with what is that supposed to be, a $10 million NIL deal? So,
yes.
And I have to ask you this, Mark, in reference to the buck nuts. And I know you're probably saying, Kevin, why in the world are you asking me about the buck nuts as far as 22 is concerned? But I have to ask you, and it's just in regards to, would you say that the strength of the Buckeyes team this year were the freshmen and sophomores as far as the most talent?
Oh, yeah.
And that being the case, would it be safe to say that this year, which I still have to say, surprised as far as you all losing 2 games, but that notwithstanding, okay, you do what you have to do in the doggone Rose Bowl, win that game. And then the next step is, as far as 22, would it be safe to say that when it's all said and done, Ohio State will win the Big Ten next year?
Ohio State's going to have the best team in the Big Ten next year. I don't know if they'll win the Big Ten, but they'll have the best team. They'll have the most talent on the roster, but that was the case this year. I do think Michigan loses more than Ohio State.
And one thing I find interesting in reference to Ohio State, and it's just that as far as after Wednesday, should have a top 5 recruiting class, and you put that on top of what they were able to do as far as the past 2 years, and that's the reason why I just pretty much thought it was a given that Ohio State would win the Big Ten. Then, hey, you're in the Final Four, et cetera, et cetera. And then also I would ask you, Mark, as far as what is going to take as far as to get. I may butcher the gentleman's last name, so forgive me. As far as, is that Brian Sabian, as far as the wide receivers coach?
Brian Hartline.
Hartline. Okay. What is going to take? And I guess it's probably not going to take anything. I guess probably, as the old folks would say, not for all the tea in China for him to leave Ohio State.
The only thing I heard there was that Marcus Freeman, whom he played with, wants to lure him to Notre Dame. I don't know if he would leave Ohio State for the same position. Other than that, he's certainly, I don't know what his aspirations are, but he is a star in the making. So he might be a guy that's going to be a defensive coordinator here in the next couple of years somewhere else if he doesn't get that job at Ohio State. And Ohio State just hired a really good defensive coordinator, so he's probably not. And so he's going to be gone. Or I'm sorry, I'm mixing up coordinator spots. So his they have an offensive coordinator in Tommy Rees at Notre Dame. Yeah, Hartline's a star in the making in regards to everything that's stated about what he is able to do in acquiring talent plus coaching of the talent. The guy was a Pro Bowl wide receiver in the NFL, so he can coach them on the field, but he also can recruit them. And so unless Ohio State's got a spot for him and is going to groom him as an offensive coordinator, he's going to leave.
Wow. So would it be, of the schools that I named earlier, Mark, would it be safe to say that the coach that would be on maybe the 2-year hot seat would be Kelly?
Out of all the guys that have just been hired?
Yes, sir. Okay, you put USC, Oklahoma, LSU, University of Miami in a hat. And of those schools, would you say a 2-year hot seat because of fan base would be the good people of Baton Rouge?
Well, I don't expect any of them to be on a hot seat in 2 years, but if there would be one, it would be him, because USC is in a conference that's not going to allow them to lose that much. Miami is hiring one of its own. So like Scott Frost, like Jim Harbaugh, they're going to give him every break in the world to succeed. And they've also spilled out more money than they ever thought that they would. So they've made a larger commitment than they ever imagined. So Mario Cristobal's there for a long, long time. And I do not expect Brian Kelly to be out of LSU in 2 years, but if there would be one coach out of that batch, he would be the guy.
I was just thinking, just as far as it didn't wish the best for him, but it just didn't seem like a natural fit. And that was the reason why I just had that little reservation, because there's going to be only so much shrimp etouffee he's going to be able to eat. Only so many babies to kiss, and as far as hands to shake before, okay, are we 10 plus 1 or are we 11 plus 1? And I don't think that 9 plus 2 a couple of years may get it. I mean, for some fan bases, it might be cool. But when it comes to Baton Rouge, I don't know that that's going to be cool, Mark. So that's the reason why I just had that little, and then plus you being in the West, that was my other thing. Yeah.
I'm counting 4 consecutive years that Les Miles lost 3 or 4 games that he was able to stick around. Now, he won a national championship, so that buys you some time. But in terms of after they lost to Alabama,
as far as that Michigan rumor also?
Pardon me?
As far as that Michigan rumor, do you think that also helped him stay there a little bit longer? He wanted to go back to his alma mater to coach.
No.
The good people.
No, I think that he won a national championship, and then 4 years later, he was back in the national championship game. I think that's what allowed him to make it through 3 and 4 loss seasons for 4 consecutive years after that.
Woo! It's going to be interesting, but the one thing I would say the theme for the next few years, Mark, is no excuses. I mean, you paid everyone. You paid me $8 million a year, paid you $8 million a year, minimum. So by that being the case, there should be no excuses. You know, institutions put their money where their mouth was, and that being the case, you know, poor Nick Saban is only making maybe about $1.5 million more than them. So I guess I'm going to have to contribute to the help Nick and Terry Saban fund because I know they're going to be in poverty because of all these other coaches receiving these raises. So, but it's going to be interesting as far as whether they're going to be able to, whether these institutions are going to be able to get their money's worth.
Kevin, you know what's going to save some of these jobs? an expanded college football playoff, because you got in the SEC, you've got Nick Saban, Brian Kelly, Jimbo Fisher, and Kirby Smart. Those four guys in particular are making ridiculous amounts of money. Okay. They can't all win. There's only so many championships to go around, SEC and otherwise. But with a 12-team college football playoff, and with roughly four, I would say on average, four SEC teams making that 12-team college football playoff, then that can be sold to a fan base as this guy succeeding. No, he didn't win the SEC this year, but he made the playoff. No, he didn't win the SEC last year, but he got in the playoff and won a game. And so that's going to appease a lot of fan bases that their team is getting into the playoff, even if they can't win their conference.
I understand and I agree, Mark, but then, okay, the Southeast is going to be fine with that. The Southeast is going to be cool with that, having 4 of the 12 schools, 4 of the 12 teams in the playoffs. But what about the other 40-plus states? They're not going to be cool with the SEC having 4 schools. And by that being the case, would it be safe to say that SEC bias is going to be at an all-time high by having 4 of the 12, or Lord forbid, 6 of the 12 being SEC schools?
Well, I can't imagine that 6 of the 12 are going to be SEC schools, but that's why I threw out 4. If you look at the current rankings of 1 through 16, I think that gives us a pretty good barometer on any year of how this is going to be structured in regards to the portion of each league being represented.
But with even 4, so you don't think the masses will have an issue with 4 teams from the SEC?
No, that's less than 2 out of 4. Right now, we've got 2 SEC teams in the 14 playoff.
But even with that, Mark, I can see pitchforks and torches on the horizon right now, even with 2 out of 4. And the doomsday scenario as far as Alabama and Georgia part 2 within a month.
Yeah, but this is a scenario in which every conference is going to be so in the current setup, there's only 4 teams in the playoff. It's a more viable argument to make that the SEC is being given preferential treatment because you only have 4 spots. So right now, in this particular year, look at this year, only 2 of the 5 conferences are represented in the college football playoff. Only 2 out of 5. So we can't continue like that. But we're going to be in a situation where every conference is represented. And most of them multiple times.
Okay. And one last question, Mark, and that is, do you feel that as far as for the network, the best national championship game for eyeballs, et cetera, would be Alabama, Michigan? And by being in Indianapolis, Michigan would have a home field advantage?
I don't really think they have a home field advantage. I don't really see that. I don't think that's much going to matter.
As far as we Alabamians are concerned, we can't get the double wides and the triple wides past Georgia. Furthest west we're going to go is Texas, and the furthest south would be South Florida. So, we can't travel past that force field to get us up to Indianapolis. I was just thinking as far as that Midwest field that, Michigan would, be able to fill up the dome. So.
Well, I think it's about time that we have a national championship game somewhere other than New Orleans, Miami, Los Angeles, or Dallas. Or somewhere in Florida, Tampa, or somewhere like that, because my goodness, Ohio State's played LSU in New Orleans They played Alabama in New Orleans. All sorts of teams from the Big Ten have had to play national championship games or major bowl games in Miami and New Orleans and so forth, and had to play USC in their backyard. So it's not going to even it out, but I think it's high time that there is some type of neutrality brought to these postseason games, especially the ones that count toward a national championship. And by the way, Kevin, if we went by the college football playoff rankings this year, and if there was a 12-team playoff, the SEC would have 3 and the Big Ten would have 3.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. As always, a pleasure to speak with you, Mark. Keep doing what you're doing, and hey, look forward to speaking with you again.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
All right, thank you. Do likewise, man.
Appreciate the super chat coming in from Mark, who says Mark offered up Chuck Ely, Toledo quarterback from the early 70s the other night. Did, in fact, win 35 straight games. Okay. I was pointing out simply that Chuck Ely did not win 35 consecutive games as a college quarterback. We typically talk college football here. I'm not talking a whole lot of high school football, but Mark has gone into high school, and then he's got the NFL or the Toledo, whatever he was, 31-0, something like that, and then just by the NFL. Great CFL career, the more you know. Okay. All right, Mark. Thank you for the information on Chuck Ely. I was lacking on my Chuck Ely knowledge, although I got to say I knew everything you just stated right there. And again, I'm not hiding. I'm not citing high school football information. All right. Get business credit. Everybody say it together. If you own a business, want to own a business, have always dreamed of owning a business, but don't know how you're going to possibly finance it, well, we've got the guy for you. Josh Van Horn over at Get Business Credit right here on YouTube. Head on over there. Josh has the knowledge base. He has the connections. He has the instruction in line to get you thousands. Not that you need thousands, but he has thousands of business lines, of credit lines. So head on over to Get Business Credit right here on YouTube. Let's get our other super chat in here. Oh, there he is. Look at that. Right on the money. There's Josh right there. Get Business Credit. So I've got a small business. You may have a small business. Or again, if this is something that you've always wanted to start, a small business, and I've got to tell all of you that I've been into this now for 14 months. 14 months full time. 14 months that I broke free from my previous employment. And it is arguably the best decision I've ever made. It's not necessarily easy every minute of every day. Do I have to make money every day? Where certainly the days are gone of being able to go on vacation and know I'm going to make as much money on vacation as I did working. I used to tell people at my former job when people would call off sick, and I was not one to do that. That's for sure. I had a sterling attendance record, but for people that would call it in sick, I would say, well, you know what? They're actually making more money sitting at home than they are coming into work. They didn't have to start their car, put mileage on their car, put gas in the gas tank, and they're able to do something else and save money around the house. So basically, they're saving money by not going to work. That said, best decision I've made professionally ever. Best decision ever professionally. I cannot even, is there a lot more Yeah. Do I not have that security? But I don't even consider it that. So boy, it was just phenomenal to make that decision. And so basically, we got our guy Josh Van Horn, and he runs Get Business Credit. We've run the banner a number of times, and I will post it several more. It's right here on YouTube. And Josh will set you up to access a number of lines of credit, even if you don't have the personal credit information, or your personal credit is not the best. You don't have to serve up your social security number. Josh is your guy. So Josh, thank you so much for kicking in here tonight. Appreciate you being here. Been busy. We'll shoot you an email this coming week. Keep up the good work. Hope to be part of the voice of college football. Thank you so much for that, Josh. Anybody else? All right, I am caught up on the live chat. Let's get back to the phone lines here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, this is Landon from Houston. Thanks for taking the call, buddy.
Sure. Thank you, Landon. What's up?
Yeah, buddy. I had a quick question for you. I had a couple things for you, actually. First one, this year, the way that the season kind of unfolded, we saw some trends broken in terms of, what teams made the playoff and what teams won their conferences. It seems we were kind of on a little bit of a streak where you had Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and somebody in the SEC, LSU, Alabama, Georgia, somebody winning that conference. But Oklahoma, I think, had won 6 straight conference titles. Clemson had won 6 straight. Ohio State had won 4 straight, and I think 5 out of 7 or something like that. And those teams had kind of enjoyed, a sense of dominance there for a while. And this year, those streaks were broken. As you follow recruiting and rosters and stuff, you think this is a result of those, of the super seniors? And do you think we can anticipate something like this again next year until these super seniors kind of fade out? I think, what is there, like 2 more years of that extra eligibility from the COVID year of 2020? Or do you think things will get back to where the rosters are kind of pointing toward next year?
I think that the situations involving Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Clemson are somewhat different. Each one's a unique situation, but overall, I think you've hit it, that the most talented teams in college football typically lose the most players to the NFL draft, and lose the most players early to the NFL draft, but they're able to supplement that with amazing recruiting classes. It's similar to what we see in men's college basketball with teams from, pick your school, Creighton, Xavier. It's been forever since I've watched college basketball, but those senior laden teams that have played together and build up continuity and experience, and they're able to challenge and defeat often teams that are much more talented. A Kentucky team that's loaded with a bunch of freshmen All-American because they're seasoned. And I think that we're seeing this to a different degree. It's a different sport. It's different numbers of players that have to be on the field. But I do think so. I think that the impact, to your point, is going to carry into next season, but I would expect it to be less. So yeah, it's gonna fade and diminish and completely leave within a couple of years.
And things kind of reset themselves. Yeah, it was just I can't remember what the numbers were, Mark, but I think it was something like, if you had preseason picked Alabama, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Clemson, there was an 87% chance you would get 3 of those teams out of the 4 in the playoff, like every year. So I just thought it was interesting this year that it was only one of those teams, that kind of found their way back, that we had saw such a run of dominance in every. Well, and I think even Oregon had won the Pac-12 4 years in a row before this year. So it seemed like every conference has just been top heavy. really bad for the last 4 or 5 years.
Oregon
I think
only won the Pac-12 twice in a row.
Is that
before
right?
this year.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
But anyway,
And one, yeah, sorry, yeah. Real quick question on. I know you're, connected to the Ohio State Michigan thing. Do you think this year? And I do a lot of travel for work. I don't get far west that often. Here in Texas, is about as far west I get, but I do a lot of traveling, back and forth from the East Coast and stuff for work. And I try to, interact with, as many different people as I can, that, if they're fan bases of different schools. And I've asked different Michigan and Ohio State fans this very question. Do you think that Michigan's win this year has either created a sense of, now we know we can, coming from a Michigan perspective, and it's given them a confidence and thus having a negative effect on Ohio State to where it's, a little bit of worry? Or do you think it's the other way, that it just kind of aroused, or rekindled an anger that had maybe diminished out in Ohio State, and they're going to push it the other way and, get back to winning the way that they were?
Well, I've always found it pretty fascinating that Ohio State has been able to keep this obsession, fascination, fervor against Michigan despite dominating the series. If you think about it, that completely is in contrast to anything that we know about human nature. Why would the team that's slapping the other one in the face and hitting them upside the head every year be the one that's obsessed with them? Why would I've got a 25-year-old son who, ever since he's been watching college football since he was about 11 or 12, looks at Michigan as he knows the history because I've slammed it down his throat, but that's just information. What he knows is that Wisconsin, Michigan State, Penn State have given Ohio State better games and been in championship races against Ohio State and not Michigan. So to him, this game is meaningless. It's not a big deal. It's a archaic, outdated tradition. What fascinates me is that Ohio State is able to recruit 18-year-olds from all over the country, but even in Ohio, and sell them on the fact that you need to be obsessed as we are with a team that we've dominated for 16 years. Like, how does that happen? I don't know. So I'm somewhat, I don't know if impressed would be the word, that they've been able to maintain this obsession that has resulted in domination, because it doesn't make sense. That doesn't happen elsewhere, where schools are obsessed with teams that they dominate, that are no challenge to them. But that's what's happened. All right. So that said, that's broken. Well, we have other rivalries. I'll point to two other prime rivalries in college football: Alabama-Auburn and Oklahoma-Oklahoma State. Where does Auburn beat Alabama? Have they been dominated by Alabama like Ohio State and Michigan? No, they win more frequently.
No.
And Oklahoma State has a similar lack of winning percentage against Oklahoma, and then they broke through this year. So those teams have won, meaning Auburn and Oklahoma State, but it hasn't changed anything. Just because they won once, it didn't change anything. So that leads me to believe that this hasn't necessarily changed anything until I see it. At the same time, Michigan's recruiting, and they're playing what we've seen every year is an aberration, because Michigan has had arguably the second best program in the Big Ten. And so the dominance is an aberration already. So Michigan should be more competitive just based on probability. Just based on sheer probabilities, they're going to win more. They're not going to lose 16 out of the next 17 years again. I don't know if that answers your question.
Do you really think they're the second best team over Penn State over the last 4 or 5 years? I know, like 24/7 Sports, their team talent composite, they've got Penn State ranked, I think, 3 spots higher than Michigan as far as overall roster talent.
Yeah, 3 spots. I don't know that that's significant. Up to this season, because I've had this argument with a number of Michigan fans, I would say that James Franklin and Penn State have been more successful in the Big Ten than Michigan has since Harbaugh arrived. But with this championship, I would say they're about even, or Michigan has accomplished more now. So I've had that conversation and run through the metrics of who's won the most bowl games and who's got what record. And I've gone through all that a number of times, so I'm not going to do it again, but it's roughly the same.
Okay. Well, and I think to your point, as of I think not that Jim Tressel didn't do it, as it just didn't seem as prominent since Urban got there, making Ohio State's roster more, elevated at a national championship level. When you recruit so many players from Georgia, Florida, and Texas, I think your point's very well taken, Mark, is that, as a resident here in Texas, I can promise you there's nobody that grows up in this state hating Michigan just naturally, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's not a thing. That nobody gives 2 thoughts about Michigan in any way, shape, or form. So, yeah, to bring them into that program and to cultivate that, I mean, that's a absolutely. I can definitely vouch for that. I mean, that's not any kind of anything. And it's funny because if I ask the Ohio State fan, they seem very confident that all this did was just make them mad. And I asked a Michigan fan, and most Michigan fans are, no, we broke through the ceiling. Now we're in their head. Now they know we can beat them and everything. So I just think it's one of those interesting dynamics about the sport and fan bases and everything. And I just wanted, I wanted to drop that in on you as someone who's informed and kind of close to it to see what you generally thought how things would, maybe shake out moving forward.
I do think being mad is an overrated emotion. I don't think that's sustainable. Okay. I don't think that's sustainable. It's like when people tell me that somebody's passionate, like when we see players, and we see a player make a tackle behind the line of scrimmage or catch a touchdown pass, and he goes crazy and he, dances all over the place, or he pounds his chest and goes crazy. And the response from the announcer is that guy's passionate. Well, maybe he is. I don't know. We know he's emotional. He's emotional. I don't know if he's passionate. Give me the guy that shows up at the football facility an hour early. He's lifting weights in the middle of March. He's lifting weights in the middle of June. He's working. He's studying. That guy's passionate. That guy is dedicated. Anybody can go crazy and jump around when they make a tackle for loss or intercept a pass. That's emotion. That's not necessarily passion.
Yeah. All right, buddy. Thanks for taking the call, man.
Yeah, thanks for the call. Appreciate that.
All right, buddy.
All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Mark, this is Brent from the Elvis Nation. How are you, my friend?
Oh, this is one of my favorite people in the world. One of my favorite people, certainly on YouTube. Brent, how are you?
Oh my God, Mark, I'm doing great. I don't usually call in. I was battling a vicious stomach bug the last couple of days, but you know what got me through it? A little thing called Mark Rogers, the Voice of College Football. Wow. Been listening just the last couple of days. I just want to congratulate you. 10 million views.
That's what they're telling me at YouTube.
Oh my God. You deserve every little bit coming your way, Mark. I just wanted to compliment you. I know there are a lot of calls on, but I don't really ever get a chance to do this. So now that I'm sick this weekend, I go, now's my chance to finally call in on my favorite show. So I just wanted to congratulate you and, it's just the beginning of your great journey, Mark. And, I just want to implore everyone out there to continue to support this kind of broadcast excellence going on here. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Nothing to plug, nothing to footballish on my mind, because you've covered Michigan pretty well in depth. So I have nothing to add to that.
well, Brent, just hearing your voice and knowing what I've been watching on your channel for the last several days, we could take this live stream completely off the rails. This wants me, this causes me to want to pin you down and just ping you with all sorts of Elvis questions now and comments. That's what I want to do. I want to take this completely off of college football and talk about Elvis for the next 3 hours. That's what I want to do.
No, last thing I want to do is be a misdirect in any way. No, I just, it's funny because you get to see people you admire coming on your stream sometimes. And I comment here and there, during the streams, but I never called in. I said, I got to do this once because I just, it's kind of interesting when you really like a person, but you're also a big fan of their work. And that's really an awesome combination. And just let everybody else out there know that, do what you can to help this channel because it's growing. And when you bump into someone else that you don't even know and they mention this channel, then you got something good kind of going. So, and that happened once. I mentioned Mark's name or something, and one of the people in the Elvis thing said something like, "Oh yeah, I know who that guy is," and I'm like, "Okay, good.
Well,
this is where we're at."
I appreciate
and,
that.
So
I got to say,
just congratulations.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I got to say that with all the great content that you produce and post each and every day, it would be impossible for me to, in any way, select my recent favorites. But except for, I have watched, I'm not going to say in full, I watched it one time in full, and then since then I have selected my favorite parts. But I have gone back to that Pearl Harbor concert reaction like 4 or 5 times. I've gone back to it and feel silly for watching the same segments over and over and over, but just to see your reaction, what you stated at the end of that in regards to your perspective on what that meant in Elvis's career history and in music history, and what might have been, was just so beautifully and accurately stated. I just had to hear it several times.
Oh, thanks. I implore anyone to just type in Elvis Presley, Pearl Harbor concert. Even if you're not really into Elvis, I've met people who aren't even into Elvis who really love that energy. It's just raw. It's such a historical musical monument. It's worthy of giving it a listen, even if you're not the biggest Elvis fan in the world. And Mark, I really have to say, I laughed the other day because you typed in something saying, "Hey, I'm trying to get to work here, guys, and your Elvis stuff is distracting me." And I had to say, "Well, Mark, welcome to my world," because I can't tell you how many times I'm editing on a Saturday night and I'm listening to Mark's call-in show or whatever you have to be streaming at the moment. I'm like, I got to remind myself to get back to work and edit my video.
Yes, this happens to me all the time. I will sit at different places depending on that particular day, but I may be seated right at this particular place and I'm kind of working on 2 computers, and I'll be in the middle of editing or need to do something, and I'll be like, seriously, Brent just posted a video and man, do I want to watch that. Or the worst is when you and Leon are on during a live stream and I'm like, no, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. Because I'm going to be in too deep 45 minutes from now, and I'm not going to be able to get out.
Yeah, and I gotta be mindful of that because I know there used to be a saying that Frank Sinatra was the hardest working man in showbiz. I really believe you're the hardest working man on YouTube. I do not know how you generate that mojo energy. You're like an 18-year-old when I don't know how you do this, and so that's part of the mystique of your thing also, because you just, like you said, that's got to be passion. You talked about passion versus emotion in your last, with your last caller. Well, that I got to believe is passion, because I remember when you first broke away and started your own journey, without anyone else having their hands in the pot. You really took this brave call, and I'm glad to hear that it's such a rewarding thing, because I saw a comment on your board the other day. I don't know if it was during a broadcast or if it was on one of your videos, but one guy said he switched over from ESPN to your show, to your channel. And I go, oh my God, that is awesome, because I think a lot of people are thinking that too, because it's real. It's, and I'm not just doing this to throw all kinds of praise your way, but it lacks the gimmicky kind of stuff that a lot of things, it's just raw, honest. And not only that, but you have a good sense of community. There's a real rapport you have. You're very respectful with your callers. And I say, you know what? I cannot wait, because I'll call in when you hit 20 million, and that probably won't be that long from now.
Well, Brent, thank you so much. And I look over my right shoulder on the screen, and I'm reminded of Michigan's great accomplishment this year in beating Ohio State, winning the Big Ten championship. So I have to say congratulations. It's got to feel amazing.
Well, I feel like an idiot, because when you interviewed me on your show last year, I was sitting there saying, we have to be realistic here. We're not playing Ohio State level football and all that. And then you compare that to what they did this year. It made me look like an idiot. I don't think I was alone in saying that last year, though.
Not at all.
I'm pleasantly surprised, Mark. But you know what, though? I do believe in your analytical takeaway with that, where it's really contingent on a couple of players, too. I don't know if the outcome would have weighed differently. They didn't have Hutchinson in the game. You know what I mean? So there are a lot of things to consider, and I don't think they're out of that. They had a lot of great luck and all that. I still think there's a little bit of a rebuild vibe going on. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But Michigan, we kind of celebrate a little too quick. So let's see if we do beat Ohio State 5 years in a row, then I'll say we're back to kind of Schembechler versus Hayes kind of momentum or something.
Yeah. Very cool.
So I just wanted to say thank you, Mark. It's really helped me get through my illness this weekend. And by the way, at midnight, there's something there on my channel you might like, GI Blues, the soundtrack, Leon and I presenting it. So,
okay.
So I swear to God, I did not call to plug that. I just mentioned it because it's almost midnight.
I will certainly have my, yes, I will certainly be listening. Of course, you can count on that. And in addition, I'm sure I will leave my amateur take on what my review is. I always leave my perspective, but yes, you can count on that.
Hey, you get a lot of conversation going there, though. Like, I'll close with this. You mentioned something about Love Me Tender and stuff, saying that you preferred the original, and instead of the way it was treated to the more upbeat version in the 70s and stuff. And there was some dialogue going on during that stream, and that's what I like. I love different people, and it's always respectful, and but you always present it well, and Leon especially really takes to what you say. And if you get Leon intrigued, then that means you're an Elvis person who knows what you're talking about.
Yes.
So,
well, obviously he is for as much as I know about the man's career, which is, I got to think I'm in the upper 0.00001%. Leon takes that to the nth degree for sure.
Oh, savant level,
Yes.
and that's a compliment. And anyway, Mark, Godspeed, good luck, and I'll give the phone over to someone else. You take it easy, my friend.
Thank you, Brent. Appreciate it.
All right, bye now.
Okay, everyone, before we take this next call, real quick, Brent at Elvis Nation. So just put in Elvis Nation. So if you like Elvis, this goes without saying. Check it out. I am guessing that maybe I'm getting a few Snickers out there or whatever. I am just telling you that this has been my experience in life, that anyone that I have said, just give Elvis a try. I understand some reputation there about clownish movies, about obviously how he destroyed himself near the end. I get all that. But the caricature and the negative portion of the legend has eclipsed, unfortunately, the sheer brilliance, genius So if you get past the caricature and the myth, the legend and all that, and get back to the music, I guarantee you, this has always been my experience with people, that they've been blown away and been like, oh, wow, I had no idea. Or really, yeah, they just are blown away. So Elvis Nation and our guy Brent. All right, let's get back to the phone lines. If we must talk about college football, welcome into the voice of college football. Who's on the line? Hello?
You there?
Yes.
Hey, Mark, great show. Just wanted to ask you a few questions.
Yes, sir. Who am I talking
When
to?
it comes to Josh
Hey, Josh.
from Oklahoma, I have a question about scheduling and versus playoff. I mean, do you think there's some? I mean, like this year we got Ohio State versus Oregon in the regular season. These really marquee matchups, and that's great. But do you think there's some sort of dissuasion by the powers that be to discourage these big matchups during the season because it takes away from later, from these big bowl things later in the season, or is it just?
So when you say the powers that be, who are you referring to? Are you referring to
Well,
the
powers that
TV
be.
networks? They
I
certainly,
guess I refer
want
college football in
those
general.
matchups. The TV networks want those matchups.
You know, in the non-conference schedule between each other because these teams are.
Okay.
I think it's
Well,
because that he's much better served later on down the line. I just have a hard. I guess I'm struggling with why is it just something because of the playoff? Is it like because we don't have a playoff, so we, you know, if we don't have playoffs, you want to schedule the best games during the regular season so you can get to the best team. Since we don't have that, I mean, where does it end up? I mean, how does it kind of all play out?
okay. So let's go back to the starting block because I'm trying to understand. I think you have a good thing here, but I'm just trying to understand it a little bit more clearly. So when you say the powers that be, who are those people that you're thinking of that would be discouraging big time non-conference matchups?
The conference commissioners, the people that are in charge of this, because and the media in general. I mean, it's just
The media.
why
Okay.
the media, you know, I mean, ESPN, the
No,
people
no,
that
no,
are
no,
controlling
no.
the college football playoff.
Okay. The media, meaning ESPN,
Not
they
yet.
want better matchups. They love those matchups. Do you think people are watching Ohio State and Akron play? No, they want the big matchups.
Then why are they not? Why is there no push for better games earlier in the season? Do we have to wait till now, December, like a Christmas?
Okay.
Games in these bowl games.
Answer this question for me. Who controls the scheduling? Who controls the scheduling for each particular team?
I would say the schools do. They negotiate between each other.
Absolutely. So the conference controls the conference schedule. So the Big Ten decides how they're going to format their league, their divisions, and the formula in which they have implemented for their schedule. Okay. So that being what it is, each league tweaks that and makes that slightly different, but they all have a similar approach. Okay. So for the Big Ten and the Pac-12 in particular, and the Big 12, they have 3 non-conference games to play. And the SEC and the ACC, those schools have 4. Well, that is completely under the control of those specific institutions. Those football programs can schedule whomever they want outside the conference. So let me ask you this. If Ohio State had not played Oregon, let's say they had played Toledo instead of Oregon and won the game 50-0 or fill in the blank, it wouldn't have mattered how much they would have won the game, but they would have won the game. Would Ohio State possibly be in a college football playoff right now?
That's what I love. That's what I think. How much was made of this Ohio State Oregon game early in the season? So much, and the result, so much were made of it. Then Oregon was given this huge ranking, a huge push, more than they deserved because of the result. But my point is, that was fake because two good football teams play each other earlier in the year. Why is that not happening anymore?
Okay.
Why is that not occurring?
Okay, who else do you want to play? Basically, we're in a situation where just about every team in America schedules one quality opponent. I'm being very
not everybody.
I'm being very general here. I'm not pointing out every single team. Well, pretty much everybody plays a Power 5 opponent, if not two. Correct? Correct.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
Every Power 5 team in the nation schedules at least one, if not two, Power 5 opponents, non-conference.
Be, and I'm assuming they are.
Yeah. They do. You don't need to assume. We know what the schedule is. So you can look at the schedule, and I'm telling you that every team in America schedules at least one, if not two, Power 5 opponents. So what are you looking for? What you want Ohio State to play Oregon and somebody else?
No, I'm looking for. I guess I don't know. I'm just kind of frustrated because it's like, is this don't have an expanded playoff that we need to schedule better for season and during this.
Unfortunately, you're cutting out, so I'm kind of missing some of your points here.
Slide by on very poor schedule. You know, nothing, and we don't have these conferences. The SEC, yes, we all agree, is probably the best conference, but SEC are playing the Big 12. How many teams from the Big 10 are playing the Pac-12 in these non-conference? Very limited. We're getting a very small sample size there. So how can we accurately compare people? And I think, is it the college's fault? No. But it's the fault.
Well, yeah, it is the college's fault.
Without a
so you're making a good point.
Well,
you're making a good point. You're making a point that I make on a regular basis, because if I was in charge, I would take scheduling out of the school's hands. The schools would not. This is the only situation where teams make their own schedules. It doesn't make any sense to me. There should be a governing body. And when I say a governing body, I'm not going to give them just carte blanche authority to do whatever they want. They would work under very strict guidelines to produce an equitable schedule, non-conference schedule for everyone. And I've produced videos, and I will in the off season, as soon as we get to the off season, for everybody that's just started to watch me in the last few weeks or months, I will produce more videos to let you know how I would reshape college football from a scheduling perspective. So you're making a lot of great points. The scheduling
and
is
I'm
not
sorry,
equitable.
I'm not like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to, I may not explain it well. That's exactly what I was trying to get to, is what you're talking about, is that I don't know where's the fault. Where do you lay blame in a situation like this? Because the schools are trying to do what they can do to schedule good games here and there, because there is no playoff. And then because there is no playoff,
what do you mean there's no playoff?
When
there
there's
is a
no
playoff.
expanded playoff.
Well,
I know there's a 14 playoff, but I mean, no. But when you have a 4 teams, I mean, really, what can you get out of 4 teams when you know there's 16 teams that probably could be competing for that same title? I'm just saying. So in the regular season, it becomes the playoff, and when the regular season becomes a playoff, and you're not scheduling good games in that, what are you getting from it? I mean,
okay. Maybe this is the answer you're looking for. Each school is looking out for itself, which makes total sense. It's just like a business. Each school only cares about their goals and priorities. So if you're Ohio State, you have different goals and priorities than if you're Kansas State or Duke or Wake Forest. Those schools don't think about a college football playoff. They are not scheduling thinking, what do we need to do in our non-conference to make a college football playoff? They are trying to make money. everybody's trying to make money first and foremost. And they're trying to, and for those schools that believe that their non-conference schedule is a vehicle to get them in position to claim a college football playoff spot, they're trying to schedule the easiest possible schedule that will still look good and give them weight toward receiving a college football playoff appearance. And for Ohio State, that's typically, we're going to schedule one difficult opponent, and then the other 2 games are going to be throwaway games. And that's going to be our 3-game non-conference schedule.
So that's just hurtful, I guess, to a lot of extent, because, I mean, throwaway games. I mean, yeah, I know teams do it. But that kind of just devalues the regular season. I mean, yeah, you got one good opponent, and
well,
it sort of does.
You also have to understand that, and we keep using Ohio State, or I do, as an example, but this falls for everyone. This includes everyone. We can't beat these guys up. So Ohio State, they can't play a Big Ten schedule and then have a 3-game non-conference schedule of Alabama, Oklahoma, and Clemson. We cannot put these athletes through that kind of grinder.
And it's hard. And I guess, and we can't compare sports. I mean, you look at basketball and football, you can't really compare them as far as the grind. But does this mean the dark horse is dead? There's not going to be a dark horse candidate come through the playoffs ever again if you only have 4 teams. I mean, who's going to get in that realistically? Who can?
4 teams.
The 4 teams, yeah. Which 4 teams? The 4 teams that schedule a cupcake and one decent team in their non-conference. And, I mean, it's built in such an unfair way at this point that unless they expand it, it's kind of ridiculous to compare teams and conferences at this point.
True.
It just seems like there's just no baseline.
Yes, you are correct in that it is almost impossible to evaluate teams and conferences because there are not enough cross-sectional games between conferences. Absolutely, there's not. The Big Ten and the SEC played 1 game this year. 1.
And so for us, I mean, these 2 conferences that probably the best conference, everybody else fight each other. It doesn't make sense.
All right, sir. Well, I'm going to let you go, partially because you keep cutting out, but I appreciate the call. Call back anytime.
I'm just frustrated with everybody. Everybody's got pride in their team. I get that, and I love it. I have pride in my own teams that I support. But I can't sit here and honestly tell myself that my team or anybody else's team is better than the other teams when they have not truly played in their shoes or truly played a hard competition type of schedule.
Also understand that it's a byproduct of the limited number of games. You can only prove so much. If you play in the SEC, you're going to play an SEC schedule. If you're a SEC team, you're playing an 8-game SEC schedule. You have 4 other opportunities to schedule non-conference games, and most of those teams go out and play and go out and schedule 1 to 2 difficult games and 1 to 2 non-difficult games. So only so much can be proven. You don't have the opportunities.
But you got to do more with less. And that's the situation of football. You have to do more with less. And we have to get to the situation and a spot where that's what it is. I mean, and the sad thing is there's going to be a lot of these other teams that are left out. Maybe there needs to be a new division in type of football. Division 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know. Because they're not on the same level. Team A doesn't have 10 times more money than Team Z. So it's just set up in such a biased, sort of nonsensical way at this point. And it has to be fixed. Will it be fixed? Probably not. But we're all going to watch it. We're all going to love it. And that's the point.
Well, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate it. You have a good night.
Thank you, Mark. You too.
All right. We can talk scheduling forever, for sure. Welcome into the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. How's it going? Steve.
Hey, Steve.
We talked a very long time ago at the beginning of the season. I think it was after the Michigan-Washington game. And I believe I asked you if you think it would be possible for Michigan to make a playoff or, win a national championship with the type of offense they were running. And, just kind of calling in, see how it comes full circle and that it is a possibility. Kind of awesome to say.
Okay. So what are you asking me to do?
I'm just kind of wondering,
well,
I guess I have nothing to say.
Based on your opening statement, I will say this. Michigan is not necessarily running the same offense today than they were then from a pass run
every week
ratio.
A little wrinkle off of it.
They have shown I made a comment to Steve Dace on his Michigan podcast the other day that what has impressed me as much as anything with Michigan is that they've been able to form an identity of power, running, tough-nosed, we're leaning on the offensive line football. Jim Harbaugh channeling through back to Bo Schembechler style Michigan football, but been able to update it and utilize the talent on the outside to be explosive at the same time as being efficient, hard-nosed, and control the clock. And that's not an easy thing, but they have accomplished that.
Yep, at every single step. And also have adding finesse and little wrinkles each week. It's been impressive to watch, and it seems like we're going to get us back for another year, knock on wood. So I'm excited to see what he'll be able to do. Kind of even a deeper offense as we move forward. But, I don't have much tonight. Just wanted to kind of tap on that and just say, go Blue.
Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Take care. Bye.
My thought on Michigan football entering the season was basically I thought that there were a lot of Michigan fans, and actually more so non-Michigan fans, who were taking that 2-4 season from last year and blowing it out of proportion. It's on record. It counts. They looked awful. They lost 4 out of 6 games. But I was of the thought that, okay, did I predict this? No, I'm not stating that. But I was of the thought Jim Harbaugh has basically churned out 9-3 and 10-2 teams. The talent on this roster is right in line with those 9-3 and 10-2 teams. Therefore, I'm expecting Michigan to fall back into that level of play. Now, I did consider the schedule to be difficult. I thought Washington was going to be better. I thought the out-of-conference game or the out-of-division game in conference against Wisconsin on the road was going to be a difficult one to navigate. So I didn't pick Michigan to meet this 11-1 record that they've produced this year. But I did expect them to get back to the level of play of a top 15 team in the country. Welcome into the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Eshawn on the line today.
Hey, Eshawn. How are you?
I'm doing well. I've got a couple questions. So earlier in the day, a couple hours ago, we saw Dan Lanning become the head coach at Oregon. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I was asked about that earlier, and I said that because Dan Lanning has never been a head coach, that we don't have an evaluation of his track record as a head coach. Unlike, let's say, Steve Sarkisian. I clearly stated Steve Sarkisian gets the Texas job, and I don't know why, based on his track record at Washington and USC. He didn't do anything that impressed me at those stops. If anything, he underperformed against his predecessors and successors. So we don't have that with Dan Lanning. What I've got to go on with Dan Lanning, and I've never even heard necessarily a statement ever leave the man's mouth. So I don't even, I've never heard from him that I can remember.
I'm a Georgia fan.
Yep.
So that's why I was kind of interested. But yeah, he does not talk very much.
Yeah. So I'm simply going by, I'm somewhat estimating without being a Georgia insider. I've got about 3 Georgia people I talk to on a fairly regular basis and bring on here. But I'm going to think that he had a large hand in on the recruiting. So that's to his credit. It looks like what they're doing is they're trying to replace Mario Cristobal, who's brought in the top recruiting class in the Pac-12 3 consecutive years, and trying to bring in somebody who's going to match that or improve upon that. And so why not go to Georgia, where he's learned from Kirby Smart? He's in a recruiting factory. They've learned from Nick Saban, and why not feed off of that train? And then obviously this defense is built primarily on talent that's been recruited, but also they got to be doing something right with the scheme to produce what is still, even despite the performance last weekend, the best defense in the country. So that's what I've got to go on. So I got to figure that that's a good pipeline to draw from.
Yeah, I mostly agree with that. Again, the defense, they had a bad, I mean, you can say they had a bad game, but really it was just a bad second quarter. They did a pretty good job, I think, in the second half after that one long Williams touchdown. But yeah, Lanning, very good recruiter. The kids that Georgia has recruited have loved him. So yeah, I do think it'll be a good hire, and it'll be interesting because, you know, outside of obviously USC is going to be really good now with Raleigh. Maybe not year one, but they'll kind of, as the years go on, they'll get better and better. Utah, as long as Whittingham stays, which he has for 15 plus years now, they'll always be relevant. And I think Oregon is that team in the North that I think can kind of control that division. Washington's been down, Stanford's been down. Oregon State's getting better, I think, but they're still a ways away. So I do think Lanning can kind of do what Cristobal did in terms of getting to that Pac-12 championship game pretty consistently.
Yeah, I would think so.
So the other question I had, was, I forget who it was, but it was someone on Fox, and they were talking about Georgia, you know, in the playoffs. Did they really deserve to go? And what he basically said was, we saw Georgia play a bunch of teams that at the time, you know, I think he brought up Arkansas was ranked at 8. Kentucky was ranked at 11. Clemson was ranked, I think, 3rd. And so they played all these teams. Auburn was ranked 18th. They played all these teams that at the time looked really good. But as the season has gone along, they haven't looked that great. And so he's basically saying, resume-wise, Georgia wasn't one of the best 4 teams. But because they play in the SEC and there's SEC bias, there's SEC bias, then that's the only reason they got in over Notre Dame. Do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I completely disagree with that.
Bias?
I completely disagree with that. If we're selecting the 4 best teams in the country, so there's a number of ways you can look at this. And I think what it comes down to is the committee tries to select a combination of the best teams and the most deserving teams. Who are the 4 best teams in the country? Nobody knows, but we've all got our opinions. My opinion would be Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State is the 4 best teams in the country. I
agree with that.
Did Ohio State earn it? Do they deserve it? No, they don't.
Ohio State doesn't deserve to go because they lost to the 2 best teams they played, I would say. But on a neutral field, I would take them over everybody but those 3 teams.
There you go. And I think a lot of people would share our opinion. But can the committee select Ohio State? Of course not. So Georgia, this is what happens, I think, is that when you look around the country, what teams have beaten elite teams? Well, very few, because those games don't exist, because the elite teams don't lose games. They don't lose games. So
yeah, the only team that I would say has a really impressive resume would be Alabama, because they have Georgia and Ole Miss, 2 top 10 wins. But outside of that, nobody really.
Well, Michigan's got Ohio State, Michigan
I mean, Michigan's
State,
got Ohio State
Iowa,
and Iowa.
Penn State.
Yeah.
You know, I'm looking at quality in terms of depth. You don't have to be a top 10 team to impress me in terms of a win.
Yeah.
Like, I think Auburn's a good
So then with
win.
Alabama, then you could go with
I think Auburn's a good
Arkansas,
win.
and-
I think Kentucky's a good win. When people say Georgia played no one, I think one of the reasons why those teams don't have the greatest records is obviously then they played an SEC schedule, and we had 13 teams make bowl games in the SEC, and they started beating each other. There was not a clear after Alabama and Georgia, and to a certain extent Ole Miss. You've got this glut of teams: Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, LSU, on and on and on. They just won games against each other. Auburn, Florida, etc. They all beat each other, and the result was you got a lot of 7-5 and 6-6 teams. But I guarantee that if we could match up Auburn, if it was physically possible for them to play everybody in the top 25, especially the final 5 to 10 teams in the top 25, they'd play a lot of close games and they'd win some of them. And so would Arkansas. And those teams are good. For Georgia to do what they did to Arkansas, nobody else is doing that to Arkansas. They
not even Alabama did that.
Yes, they just Arkansas couldn't even run their offense in that game. They obliterated them. That same Arkansas team, as you well know, turned around the next week and scored 51 points at Ole Miss. Clemson went 9-3. No, this was not a vintage Clemson team, but I think we got a barometer.
I mean, they went to overtime with a ranked NC State team, and they lost a fairly competitive game to, was it Pittsburgh, around the top 10? So
yeah, they lost to Pitt. Sure, they lost to Pitt. They lost in overtime to NC State.
This has probably been.
Yeah, Clemson's a good team. Clemson is one of the top 15 teams in the country. Yeah. Arkansas is one of roughly the top 15 teams in the country. Auburn's a top 30 team in the country. Kentucky's a top 25 team in the country. You know, they played plenty of good teams. People are just looking for ways to pick on and criticize teams.
Tennessee in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Georgia's an excellent team. They're easily one of the top 3-4 teams in the country. Easily. Probably the top 2.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get to see it in the Orange Bowl. I think Georgia and Michigan is going to be a good game.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, though, is like, I don't know who else you would have had. Because here's the story. So entering championship week, everyone was saying Georgia's a lock, no matter what happened. I think most people thought Georgia would win. I would say the percentage is about 60-40, 65-35. Georgia beats Alabama.
At least.
Obviously, that didn't happen, but everyone was saying Georgia was a lock no matter what happened. And then they lost. And look, if Oklahoma State had won, then maybe I still would have put Georgia in there, but maybe you would have somewhat of an argument. But Baylor won the conference championship game. You want a Baylor team that lost to 5-7 TCU in there? Notre Dame, you brought up the quality wins. Notre Dame's 2 best wins are 8-4 Wisconsin and 8-4 Purdue. Like, I mean, those aren't better than Georgia's wins. And if you're gonna go, oh, Georgia lost their last game. Why don't, for Notre Dame, when we're comparing those teams, why don't we freeze the record before conference championship week, right? Because I don't want to punish these teams that have to play a conference championship game because they're in the conference, especially the SEC, rather than comparing them to Notre Dame, who's an independent. So, yeah, I don't know why he thought that Notre Dame should have been in the playoff over Georgia. It just makes no sense to me. Like, what has Notre Dame done this season, really?
Yeah, they've beaten a slew of like top 50 teams. That's what they've beaten. They've beaten the North Carolina and Virginia Techs of the world, and Virginia and those type teams. And like you say, Purdue and Wisconsin are top 25 teams. They're good teams, but that's the best that they've done. Those are their 2 best wins.
Yeah. And look, if you want to say, maybe the SEC has been down a bit in a couple of years, I guess you can say that. Maybe there's been a few years where Alabama made the conference look better than it is. But if you want to say there's SEC bias, you can look at the committee. All these guys have histories at like Rutgers and Iowa. You know, they're not. I think there's one guy from Kentucky, but that's it. You'd have to go through. I mean, the NFL would have to be biased because every year SEC has the most players drafted every year. You know, it just. I mean, you'd have to. There's so many different people that would have to be biased towards the SEC. Bryce Young just won the Heisman, or the Heisman voters biased because he's an SEC player.
Well, they are. I they are biased.
SEC bias. They are biased.
This is how they're biased. So just to clarify this, they're not SEC bias. The voters for the Heisman Trophy, this has been clearly depicted every year. They're biased toward their region. That there is not a coincidence that if you're from the Northwest and there's a Northwest player involved, then it's skewed heavily toward whoever, Christian McCaffrey or whoever's in the Northwest that particular year. And then that holds true for the other parts of the country. That's because of the nature of those guys' jobs. And that's why most of them should not be voting for the Heisman Trophy. And I talked about this the other day because I lived this for 7 years when I covered, when I worked for a TV station in Mississippi, and I covered Alabama, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. They go to football games. If I am the beat writer for Mississippi State for the Jackson, whatever, the Clarion Ledger in Jackson, Mississippi, I am going to the Mississippi State game on Saturday, and I live and breathe Mississippi State football, and I don't know anything else that happened. I don't watch any other football. So who am I going to vote for? I'm going to vote for the teams that I've seen and the talk that's surrounding me every day, all the time. And everybody approaches it like that. These guys don't know anything about what's going on elsewhere in the country as much as they should. And that's not their fault. They're doing their jobs.
I'm sure the people that live in Birmingham, Alabama know more about the Crimson Tide than they do the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Well, absolutely.
So, yeah. All right, Mark. That's all for me tonight. Have a good rest of the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate that. As I've said many times, or not many times, I've stated this a few times, just to give you an idea of what a typical day looks for a TV guy that works at your favorite local station. So wherever you live, whatever TV stations. So I've lived in Connecticut because ESPN brought me here 20 years ago, but I don't watch local news or sports. I have no idea what's going on in Connecticut. I just don't care. But you know, way back when I lived in Ohio and I was an Indians fan, I wasn't a Browns fan, but anyway, Indians fan, then I'm watching the local sports every night, just like many of you grew up doing that. Okay. When I was the sports director at a CBS station in Mississippi, and we had to cover Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Alabama, and that was our priority, we were going out to those 3 games every Saturday. So, for example, if I'm going to the Alabama-Tennessee game in Tuscaloosa, and it's a 2:30 kickoff, well, I've got to get to the stadium at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Therefore, I've got to leave it with traffic and everything. I got to leave it like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. Games kick off at noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central. So I'm not seeing any noon games. I'm going to that Alabama-Tennessee game. I'm covering the game. I'm standing on the sideline. I'm standing in the press box wherever I decided to stay. I would have a spot in the press box, but I would usually stay on the field and watch the game. And I'm watching for 3.5 hours Tennessee and Alabama play. Then the game's over at 6:30. I got to go to, at the time, Gene Stalling and Philip Fulmer's news conferences. I go there, listen to what those guys have to say, take a ton of notes so I can pick out the best sound bites. Then I'm going in the locker rooms and I'm talking to Jay Barker and I can't remember any Alabama players from and Freddie Kitchens and whomever else. Okay. By the time I get out of there, it's 8 o'clock at night. I am rushing back to the station to get a story on the air for the 10 o'clock news. I'm not watching any other college football that entire day. By the time I'm done, it's midnight. I'm going home. I'm exhausted. And I might, because I'm a nerd, nobody else would do this, but I went home and caught the last quarter of a Washington State Stanford game. I didn't watch any other college football the entire day. But they're going to hand me a vote for the AP All-America team. Am I really qualified? If that's what I'm doing every Saturday, and that's what those people do every Saturday covering college football. They're not like me, where I'm sitting on my couch and I've got 4 TVs and I'm watching everything possible for 15 hours from noon till 3 o'clock in the morning. No, those people are focused on one team. So are they really qualified to be voting for the Heisman and the All-America and the Doak Walker? No, they vote for their conference. It's been proven. It's been proven. All right. Don't know that there's anybody else on the line. And anything else in the live chat I should hit on? I appreciate everyone being here. So, over the next few days, let's keep this in mind. Oh, for the first time in however long, I don't have a top 25 that actually makes sense to produce. Wow. That almost hurts me. All right. So, keep in mind, we are going to preview as many bowl games as we possibly can get to. If you could see my schedule, well, I erased it from last week. Just here in the last 4 or 5 days, we've recorded segments on Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, Nebraska, Iowa, Texas A&M, Alabama, Florida State, Miami, Clemson, Oklahoma, Oregon, USC, Notre Dame, on and on and on and on, Iowa State. Okay, so bottom line point is keep it locked in here at the Voice of College Football. I am also producing videos where I've already released these on the Michigan channel, in particular, the SEC channel, where I've matched up the stats for Georgia and Michigan, for Alabama and Cincinnati, kind of combed through those, and then also looked at the schedule strengths, both teams. Historically, I'm going to look at, I produced a video that I posted on the Michigan channel with the Michigan all-time NFL draft picks, first-round draft picks, record, conference titles, national championships, Heisman winners, all those things. Weeks spent in the AP poll, top 10 weeks, number 1 weeks versus Georgia and all their metrics throughout the years. All that kind of stuff. Trying to produce everything I possibly can. If you have any suggestions, anything that you would like me to hit on that is directly related, especially to the college football playoffs and the bowl games, let me know. You can always hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. If it's anything off-season related, believe me, we will get to it. Once the season's over, this is the place to be for college football coverage during the off-season. We don't have an off-season. We treat May 1st just like it's November 1st. So during the off-season, we really have fun with breaking down schedules and transfer portal and recruiting and all-time rankings. I'm going to spit out, I guarantee you I will spit out the best non-conference games for 2022 and the best conference games. And I'm going to rank the quarterbacks and running backs and offensive linemen and defensive linemen. I'm going to rank every position. I'm going to do all that stuff throughout the offseason. I'm going to lay out the playoff. This is what we're going to do. I am going to deliver what a 8, 12, and 16 team playoff would look like this year. Got to do that. And there's different ways to approach that. Of course, you could just flat out take the college football playoff rankings, or you could look at the conference championships and include the group of 5. So I'm going to deliver videos on that. I spent this afternoon delivering videos on Michigan, Clemson, and somebody else, Texas, recent commits. National Signing Day is coming up December 15th. That's this Wednesday. I will be here in this chair nonstop Wednesday. We are going to cover National Signing Day as we always do. If you have not been with us on previous National Signing Days, I will be here all day. I'm going to schedule as many beat writers all day Wednesday and Thursday because many of them can't meet on Wednesday because they're just too locked into the recruiting requirements and all the stories that they have to post for their websites. So Thursday and Friday, we're going to cover as many teams in recruiting and lock up National Signing Day like nobody else right here at the Voice of College Football, nonstop, all the time. Great to see you. Great to have you here. If you would like to contribute, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App, just search MarkRogersTV, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Appreciate you being here. Hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live so you don't miss a live stream. Next one's going to be most likely on Monday night right here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for being here. And the bowl games, we are just 6 days away from bowl games. And so we will cover those like nobody else as well. Best discussion, debate, and analysis, not because of me, because of you, your contribution, and your participation. So we will see all of you next time.